to the Smart Manufacturing Initiative here at Semicon West. I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Salmon, who is, let me get this correct, the VP of Collaborative Technology Initiatives.
Yes, it's a long title. Thank you, Trevor. It's really meant to encompass a number of different technology areas that we brought together into one group. I think it's also indicative of where the industry is going overall. We have to have a lot of collaboration across the supply chain and across different areas. So my group brings together materials, packaging, test, components, devices, and also we work in the equipment space, particularly in the 200 millimeter space, so working with more devices, analog power, RF, etc.
So and you're also working with the PCBA and PCB groups as well.
Yes, that's a great point. So I started off in the advanced packaging area, but as I mentioned, we're seeing sort of this cross-supply chain, not just collaboration, but almost a convergence, if you will, where advanced packages are going into some of the assembly areas when we start looking at, say, system in package, system-level architectures. We're involved in a roadmap effort that is looking all the way up into system-level architectures, so we have to be capable or looking at embedded substrates, and into other substrates, advanced substrates, and down into PCBs. So a number of the SMT and PCBA companies are also looking at advanced packaging, and so you start to see that overlap more and more as we go into more of a, I would say, consumer-focused products.
So we're actually going to start to see clean rooms coming in more and more into PCBA factories.
Absolutely, I believe so. I think that's really the interest for a lot of the PCBA SMT companies are looking at some of the programs that SEMI has in the advanced packaging, whether that might be a die level attach or other programs. We're also covering a lot of work in flexible and hybrid electronics, which kind of brings the two groups closer together, and some advanced sort of MEMS and sensor platforms as well.
So, Tom, the industry is going through a huge revolutionary change at the moment with all this smart factory initiative that we see behind us. That encompasses, of course, a lot of standards and different things which you're involved in. At our end, we've just recently seen the Hermes standard coming in, CFX from IPC, and most recently, a couple of weeks ago, JARA bringing out their own version. You have been immersed and been involved in for many years with SexGem, which is still the major standard at front end and back end semiconductor. Help me make sense of all this.
Right. So I think it's actually it is a good thing. On the one hand, it's a good thing that we have multiple standards across the industry, because different industries, different components, different levels of different factories are going to need different standards. Where SexGem fits in best has traditionally been in the front end, but after the SMT and PCBA assembly world was working in SexGem, there's a little bit of a frozen in time sort of scenario where they stepped out of the use of SexGem, and I think maybe we could have done a little bit better job of communicating exactly sort of the progression and the work that's been going on in SexGem. Now that we see this overlap of the advanced packaging and PCBA world, we're getting people coming back and saying, okay, we really like the two-way communications that are in SexGem. We like the fact that it's been adapted over time to work in flow shop manufacturing environments like photovoltaic, and now like the board, and we like the fact that we can have multiple levels of standards within these factories and sort of choose best of breed best practices within that environment.
Right. So what you're saying, there was a miscommunication there, because there has been ongoing development of SexGem, and you're even bringing in some of the EDA stuff for data transfer as well, but that's more at the front end, and it hasn't really trickled down.
Right, exactly. So when we adapted the SexGem standards for the photovoltaic industry, we worked on something with not quite as much overhead. There's been a lot of development working on having not just the horizontal communications machine to machine, but also vertical communications from machine to MES. But then also adapting it from not just for PV, but more recently with groups like TPCA in Taiwan for PCB manufacturing, and now, as you mentioned, JARA on the assembly side.
Interestingly enough, JARA seems to be working closely with Semi on integrating with SexGem rather than going on the CFX route. So it's a bit of a mishmash at the moment, but I'm guessing everybody's going to have to work with everything.
Yeah, I think what I've heard from the user base is they can never be 100% sure you're gonna have go with one scenario or another, and so they actually, I think they prefer to have the option to use certain standards and certain capabilities, and we have certain users who are able to show how they can conveniently sort of map those out and use those in different areas in the different facilities.
So let's move on a bit and tell us a bit about your smart manufacturing initiative and where you see the future going for Semi organization.
So the overall smart manufacturing initiative in Semi is really meant to focus on the full supply chain, so end-to-end. We often like to say from sand to smartphone. And in sand to smartphone, we're talking about incoming materials from the wafer as it goes into the front end, all the way through to final product assembly. And at the same time, as much as possible, we want to remain agnostic in how we approach, whether that's best practices, standards, cost of ownership, and benchmarking each of those areas. So we want to make it full supply chain. We also want to have what we call a digital thread. And the digital thread is meant to go all the way up to the data transfer protocol layer so that we have smooth data transfer protocol at the line level, at the factory, and probably most difficult and the long-term goal is to really have that factory to factory or entity to entity.
That's where you're looking for blockchain technology or experimenting with it.
Exactly. That's where the data security, the IP security comes into play. We've got to have solutions. Blockchain is one that's been proposed. I think the jury's still out, but we're looking at different data transfer protocols so that we can assure the different entities that only the data that is right for that particular entity is getting transferred. To do that, we've got to move from just PowerPoint presentations and sort of blind faith to where we're now in our initiative, we're looking at specific proofs of concept for smart data. So showing that we can transfer certain types of data in a secure environment to build that level of comfort.
Now, as part of your job, Tom, you're responsible for doing this globally, for rolling these programs out, but I believe there's something starting here locally in San Jose in the next upcoming months. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the convergence earlier, and so wherever we can bring different segments of the industry to talk about, okay, how are we going to work to make sure that we have smooth manufacturing flows, that we have smooth data flows together, is going to help sort of build that level of comfort. One of the areas that I think we see is most ripe for that is this overlap between the advanced packaging world and the SMT PCBA world. So we're putting together, we're going to start off with somewhat of an informal workshop. It's going to be here in the Semi headquarters, bringing together the advanced packaging community as well as the SMT PCBA community to talk about machine-to-machine communications from line level, factory level, and then hopefully at an entity-to-entity level as well too.
Do you know when you're holding that?
We're looking at tentatively the October timeframe. Yep, we haven't pinned down an exact date, but I'll definitely get back to you with all the details.
It's great to see Semi moving forward, and obviously there's a lot going on that a lot of us in the PCBA world haven't been familiar with, so thank you for bringing us up to speed today.
Great. It's all about collaboration. Thanks so much, Trevor. Appreciate it.